The blood had frozen to her sleeve by the time she reached the ridge. Not a little blood, the kind that soaks through a field dressing and through a base layer and into the fabric beneath, and then the cold takes it and makes it permanent. A dark map of the last 4 hours pressed against her skin. She did not look at it. She had looked at it once, when it happened, long enough to assess and dress and continue, and she had not looked at it since because looking at it again served no function she currently required. She was moving at a crouch along the eastern ridgeline in darkness so complete that the valley below was a sound rather than a sight. Wind through dead grass, the distant knock of something metal against stone. The silence that comes after the silence, the one that means you are temporarily not being hunted. Temporarily. Behind her, in a single file that she had organized 12 minutes ago, in a basement that smelled of diesel and mold, and the specific fear of people who have been kept in a small room for too long, were 6 people. 3 of them could walk unassisted. 1 needed a shoulder, 2 needed both of them. And the arrangement of 6 people and 1 injured handler across a ridgeline in the dark was a logistics problem she was solving in real time while also monitoring the tree line to the south, where 2 hours ago, there had been movement that had not resolved into anything specific and which she had not stopped thinking about since. She had not been extracted. She had not been extracted because the extraction window had closed 40 minutes before she reached it, because what she had found in the valley had changed the timeline in ways that the people who designed the extraction window had not anticipated. Because the people who designed the extraction window had not known there were 6 people in a basement that she had not known about either until she was already inside the target compound with 12 minutes of operational window remaining. She had made a choice. The choice was the reason she was now on a ridgeline with a frozen sleeve and 6 people behind her, and a tree line to the south that she had not resolved. Before we continue, if this story already has you, subscribe right now and stay with me until the very last word. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this one reaches. Her name was Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Mellon. She was 34 years old, and she had been in places like this. Not this ridge, not this valley, not this cold, but places with this precise quality of alone, 11 times in 9 years of service, and what she had learned across those 11 times was not what most people expected her to have learned. Most people, when they imagine someone doing what she did, imagine that what was learned was hardness, distance, the ability to turn the human parts of the process into something administrative, something that could be filed and closed. What she had actually learned was the opposite of that. What she had learned was that the human parts were the only parts that mattered, that the mission existed because of them, that every calculation, route, timing, risk tolerance, the decision to extend an operational window by 40 minutes for 6 people in a basement ran through them whether you admitted it or not. That the operators who tried to remove the human from the calculation were not more effective. They were less because they had removed the thing that told them what the calculation was for. She was moving and thinking both the way she had trained herself to move and think, 1 track for the terrain and the body position, and the 6 people behind her. Another track running the problem of the tree line and the remaining distance in the emergency extraction protocol she had sent 12 minutes ago on the field radio and not yet received confirmation on. The radio was in her left cargo pocket. Her left arm was the injured one. She had not reached for the radio since she sent the transmission. She was thinking about a man named Warrant Officer First Class James Cutter, who was not here and whose absence was the reason for the frozen sleeve and the 6 people and the choice made in the basement. Cutter had been her partner for 3 deployments. He was meticulous, careful, allergic to improvisation in the way that people who are very good at planning sometimes are, and they had balanced each other in the specific way that 2 people balance when one of them is always looking at the map and the other is always looking at what the map doesn't show. Cutter was in a hospital in Germany, a road outside Erbil 6 weeks ago, a vehicle that should not have been on that route at that hour, and was. He was alive. She knew this because she had called the hospital from a satellite phone in a briefing room in Turkey before boarding the aircraft for this mission, and the nurse she had reached had told her he was stable and sleeping, and had asked if she was family. She had said yes because the alternative required explanation she did not have time for, and the nurse had accepted this because something in her voice had made the question seem beside the point. Cutter would have stayed on the extraction window. She knew this. He would have assessed the basement situation with the specific precision that was his nature, and concluded that 6 people changed the risk calculus beyond acceptable parameters, and that the mission as designed did not include a basement, and that the extraction window existed for reasons that superseded the discovery of things the mission had not planned for. He would have been applying the correct doctrine. She had applied a different one. She had applied the one that Cutter would also have applied, she was certain, if he had been the one at the basement door with 12 minutes of window left and 6 sets of eyes looking at him out of the dark. The doctrine that said, you do not leave people in a basement. The 6 behind her were a mix she had sorted during the 12 minutes of organized movement after the basement. 2 American contractors, infrastructure workers who had been taken 9 weeks ago from a work site in the Western Province. 1 British signals intelligence officer whose name she had not yet asked because the time for names had not arrived. 2 locals, a woman and an adolescent boy who turned out to be her son, who had been in the basement for reasons that she had a partial understanding of and a complete certainty about the relevant part, which was that they needed to not be there anymore. And 1 man who had not spoken since she opened the basement door, who walked with the steadiness of someone maintaining steadiness through considerable effort, whose jacket bore the remnants of rank insignia that had been partially removed, and who she had placed second in the file because something about his bearing told her he would hold that position without instruction. He had held it without instruction. She had not asked his name either. Names later. Ridge now. The tree line resolved at 0314. Not into a threat. Into wind. A particular gust from the south that had been moving brush against itself in a pattern she had been reading as possible contact. And that was, on resolution, simply the valley doing what valleys at altitude did at this hour. She let out a breath she had been managing for 90 minutes and adjusted the route 20 meters east to give the southern approach more buffer and kept moving. The man behind her, the one with the remnant rank insignia, moved the adjustment before she signaled it. He had read the same thing she read in the tree line and drawn the same conclusion and adjusted without being told. She noted this without looking at it directly, added it to what she was building about him. At 0341, the radio in her left cargo pocket vibrated once. She stopped the column with a closed fist, reached for the radio with her right arm crossing her body, an awkward reach that sent a specific message through her left shoulder that she declined to respond to. Brought the radio up, read the display with a red filtered lens, emergency extraction. Confirmed, grid reference. Time window, 41 minutes. She did the math against the terrain. It was close. Not impossible. Close in the way that things become close when you are moving 6 people across a ridgeline in the dark, and one of them needs 2 people to walk, and the terrain between current position and the grid reference had not been reconnoitered because nobody had planned for this. She turned and found the British signals officer. She had placed him 4th in the file because he had moved with the body language of someone trained to move in the dark. She reached him in 4 steps. "What's your condition?" She said. "Quiet. Functional," he said. "Same register. I need you to take the rear. Watch the south. Anything that isn't wind." 1 tap on the shoulder of the person in front of you. He nodded once. Moved, she went to the 2 contractors. Assessed. They were moving on adrenaline and would be for another 20 minutes before the adrenaline ran out and the reality of 9 weeks in a basement arrived, and she needed to use the 20 minutes. She went back to the front of the column, looked at the man with the remnant rank insignia, who was looking at the terrain ahead with an expression that told her he had also done the math. 41 minutes, she said. "I know," he said. It was the first thing he had said. His voice was controlled in the specific way voices are controlled when they have been in a basement for long enough that speaking again is something that requires attention. She turned and started moving. They covered the first 800 meters in 19 minutes, which was slower than she needed and faster than she had expected. The woman with her son had found a pace that worked and held it without complaint. The 2 contractors were burning the adrenaline the way she had counted on. The British officer at the rear had been silent and consistent, and once, at a rocky section that required both hands, had simply lifted one of the contractors by the pack and moved him through it without discussion. The man with the remnant insignia was carrying the second contractor, not assisting, carrying. His arm across the man's back, the contractor's weight redistributed across his frame, moving through the terrain with the efficiency of someone who has done this before and intends to keep doing it until the task is complete. At the 900-meter mark, her left arm told her something she had been declining to hear. She stopped, processed, assessed the functional impact against the remaining distance and the remaining time. She reached into her vest with her right hand, broke a single-dose field medication packet with her teeth, took it dry, gave it 45 seconds. The man with the remnant insignia was beside her. He had passed the contractor to the British officer without stopping the column. "Left arm," he said. Not a question. "I'm fine," she said. "I know," he said. "Left arm." She looked at him for a moment. He was looking at the terrain ahead with the same expression, forward, assessing, already solving the next problem. She held out her left arm. He produced a field dressing from somewhere inside his jacket. She did not ask where it had come from, the same way she had not asked his name, and replaced the frozen one with the efficiency of someone who had done this in the dark before and would not be slowed by the dark now. 41 seconds. He stepped back and rejoined the column. She looked at him for a moment longer than she meant to. "Name?" she said. He told her. She was quiet for 3 seconds, in a way that was not silence, but rather the rapid reorganization of several things she had understood separately and was now understanding together. "You've been in that basement for 11 weeks, he said. She absorbed this, the rank insignia she had noted, the bearing she had read correctly and then set aside because the priority was the ridge and the tree line in the 41 minutes. The way he had moved, from the first moment, not like someone who had been kept in a basement for 11 weeks, but like someone who had been waiting in a basement for 11 weeks, which was a different thing. "We were told you were—" "I know what you were told," he said. She nodded. "Filed it." "Can you run?" she said. 12 minutes, she said. "It's going to be necessary." He nodded, moved back to the column. She went to the front and started moving at a pace that was not quite running and was faster than walking, and that the column matched without being asked to, because something in her posture communicated that the margin had changed and that the next 12 minutes were not the same as the last 19. They reached the extraction grid with 4 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. She popped the IR strobe at 2 minutes and held position with the column behind her in the shelter of a rock formation that was not substantial, but was what existed, and she watched the southern approach and the eastern ridge and the sky, and at 1 minute 40 seconds, the helicopter came in from the northwest low and fast, running dark, and set down 30 meters out in a flat section of ground that was not a landing zone and was being used as one. She moved the column. She counted them aboard. 6. Checked. Looked back at the ground they had covered. Looked at the tree line to the south one final time. Nothing. She got on. The debrief was in Turkey 12 hours later, in a room with 4 people from 2 agencies and a recording device and coffee that she did not touch. She gave the account in full, the timeline, the compound, the decision at the basement door, the 11 weeks, the man with the remnant insignia whose name she had given the pilot on the helicopter, who had given it to the ground element, who had given it to the people currently sitting across the table from her, whose expressions told her that the implications of that name were larger than her operational brief had contained. She laid it out without editorializing. The facts in the order they occurred, the decision made, and the reasoning for it. The 40 minutes of extended exposure. The ridge and the tree line and the frozen sleeve and the choice. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. The senior agency officer, a woman she had worked with once before and whose judgment she respected, looked at her for a moment. "The extraction window," she said. "You knew it would close." "Yes," Mara said. "And you made the call anyway." "Yes." The woman was quiet for another moment. 6 people, she said. "Yes," Sarah said. The room absorbed this. The recording device continued its work. The coffee cooled. "Your arm," the woman said. "It'll hold," Sarah said. The woman looked at her for a moment longer, then looked at the file in front of her, then closed it. "We're done here," she said. 3 weeks later, when her arm had been properly treated and had begun the specific slow process of deciding to cooperate again, Sarah received a letter. Not a message, a physical letter, handwritten, in the particular controlled script of someone for whom writing has required at some point deliberate attention. It said that 11 weeks is a long time to wait. It said that he had heard the sound of the basement door and had chosen to believe it was the right sound before he could see who was behind it. Because at 11 weeks, you have to make some choices on faith. It said that he was aware of what the extension had cost her, and that he intended to make sure it was not a cost that went without acknowledgement. It was signed with a rank and a name. She folded the letter, placed it in the pocket of her jacket, did not respond, not because she had nothing to say, because what she would have said was already in the record, in the debrief, in the 4 words she had given the agency officer in the room in Turkey. 6 people. Yes, there is a question that gets asked in the hours and days after the mission that sounds like an administrative question and is not. It sounds like a risk assessment, a debrief question, a policy matter. It sounds like, what were you thinking, extending the window? But the question underneath is older than policy. It is the question that every person who has ever had to choose between the safe thing and the right thing has heard, in the quiet after the choice, in the particular silence that follows a decision that cannot be unmade. The answer, when given by the people who have actually made the choice, is rarely dramatic. It is rarely the language of sacrifice or heroism or the cinematic vocabulary that gets attached to these moments afterward. It is usually quieter than that, more specific, more human. It is usually some version of, I opened the door and they were there, and that was the whole of it. The door was open. They were there. The window was closing. Every other variable collapsed into those 3 facts, and when the 3 facts were present at the same time, in the same basement, the calculation ran itself. Some people, in the dark and the cold and the blood freezing to the sleeve, wait to be certain before they move. Sarah Mellon moves and becomes certain on the way. This is not recklessness. This is not the absence of calculation. This is a different kind of calculation, the kind that includes the things the briefing document cannot contain. The 11 weeks, the boy and his mother, the man who was waiting to believe the door was the right door, the kind that knows what the mission is for. She came back with 6 people and a frozen sleeve and 0 regrets. The regrets would have been the other thing.